Good evening, class. I wanted to take a little bit of time tonight and throw together a video for you covering some little tips and tricks that I find very useful when it comes to doing walk cycles. I'm going to try to make this as short as possible and just cover some key things. So I'm not going to get into an entire walk from beginning to end. I just want to kind of cover some really high level things that I think will help everyone. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some layers. I do not like having things just out there willy-nilly. So select my bones, go to my bones layer, add the objects. I'm going to hit V to make them invisible. So now everything that's left are the controllers that I will actually use when it comes to animating. So I'll make another layer and let's name this controllers. And I'm gonna make these, let's just make them all green. Right click, add objects. All right, so there's my rig. There are my bones, and let's hit this guy here to template them. So now I can't select them. The only thing I can select are my controllers. All right, so with that, we can now start animating. So I'm going to select on my wrist here, and let's just start posing. So yeah, let's just get right to it. Just trying to think of how I wanted to best do this, but I think the best way is just get right to it. So I'm going to start with our contact pose here, and this is where it's a good place to start as any, right? So we'll move our hands forward. That's probably good. All right, now notice how I'm constantly rotating around what I do here in my perspective view. Yeah, I just can't stress it enough that when you're working in 3D, that really is just so important to do. It's so important to have a very clear understanding of what you're doing in 3D space. So as I'm spreading his legs out, obviously he is shrinking down. So I'm going to go and pull his hips down a little bit. We don't want to see his legs snap straight like that. Even a minor bend is better than a straight snap. So that's pretty good. Let's pull up the toe. And since we don't have a mesh attached to this guy, the heel could be anywhere. I'm just going to leave it like this for now. I'm not really going to worry with pulling it all the way down to the ground. Again, do want to kind of bypass some things so that we can just get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak. So I think that's probably good for that. I personally like to see a little. Oh, nope. Don't rotate that much. So on this one, I want to have a little bit more control over some rotation. So don't like that one. Don't like that one. Whoop, whoop. Broke that all together. I mean, I guess that's okay. I'm not really a fan of other people's rigs. I like making my own. But I think this is probably okay. Undo. Yeah, I don't want to, I'm getting caught up in it anyway, which is what I said I wasn't going to do, but it's hard not to. Especially once you start at, you just kind of want to keep going. So I'm just straightening him up. All right, so let's call that good for now. All right, so there is our first pose. And let's go to our layers, right click, select the objects. So now we're selected on all the objects, and I hit S in my timeline to make a key. You can also come down here and turn on the auto keyframe toggle, and what that does is just whenever you make a change, it's going to automatically key that change as long as you have a first key. So our first frame here, we see I'm going all the way to 120, which we know we don't. We only want to have 30 frames. So let's change our time here to 0 to 30. And 24 seconds. Let's switch this to 30. So now we know, and when it did that, it made an update there. So let's put that back. So we're at 0 to 30. All right, so here at frame 30 with our controller selected, I'm going to hit the S key, which made another key for us out here. So now we know we have a perfect loop. As it stands right now, it's a perfect loop. So now all we have to do is create the opposite frame here. So with that being said, what I'm going to do, a little trick, is I'm going to bring my bones back out here for a second. So obviously the left leg and the right leg need to switch positions here at frame 15 because this is a new step. So what I'm going to actually do, just to make my life a little easier so I can kind of reduce some guesswork, is I'm going to select on the lead leg here, and I'm going to hit Control D or duplicate. Okay, and now I've got a copy here of this leg. All right, now, so if I move my my lead leg, and we see I know where my back leg needs to go. So I'm going to go into this view here. Okay, so I can see exactly where my lead leg needs to go. So I'm going to select on the controllers. Okay, and go ahead and move this leg into place. And I mean, it's not perfect, but you can see that it's close enough. Okay, and now this leg is still here. So what this means, oops, you know what? I made a mistake. Let's move him back. I forgot to go to frame 15. All right, so at frame 15, let's move him again. Move this down, and you see, because my auto key is on, I'm automatically getting that key, so I don't have to hit the S key. And not really going to worry about it being too perfect. Doesn't need to be too perfect. Okay, but so now I know that my back leg is good. And because I made a copy of the lead leg, I now know where my front leg needs to go to. And it looks like I actually keyed the back leg. So I go to frame 15, and I now know exactly where this leg needs to go. So again, at frame 15, I can just make that move. Now my legs are in a perfect position. So I'm just going to go ahead and select on my dummy leg there. I don't need that anymore. And let's take a look, see. And we see we are cross-country skiing, which is always a great first step. Okay, so now let's do the arms. So I'm going to do this back here. Okay, so frame 1, let's go to frame 15. And basically let's do what we just did. Kind of line that up like so. Okay, so now the arm goes back. And now I need to know at frame 15 where my back arm needs to go. So again, come here, select the arm bones, Control D to duplicate. My arm bones are now duplicated. So they sit there and wait for me. So let's grab the back arm, go to frame 15, move this guy forward, close enough, right? I can now delete my dummy arm. And again, that's space bar to hop in and out of maximizing the frame. So now we have our main keys taken care of for the two biggest parts of the cycle. Is just getting the arms and the legs to go opposite of each other. So let's select all of our controllers again, select the objects. And we know we keyed here, but what we didn't do, we didn't key everything here. Like for example, our hips aren't keyed. Some of these guys actually looks like they did all get keyed. Okay, still a good habit. Select everything, hit S, just so we know that everything is in fact keyed at this point. All right, so that is our two contact poses taken care of, and as we see, we've got a perfectly looping cycle. All right, so let's do the down frame. So the down frame, big parts of this obviously is what the hips do here. Okay, so we know we've got a down, a passing, and an up. Okay, so 15. Let's go with, what do you think? Let's 4, 8, and 12. Let's try something like that. Let's go 4, and we're going to make our down. Now, how far down do we want to go? Let's look at where it is on the Y. Right now, it's at 5.434. Okay, so we know we need to go less than that. So let's just bring it down a little bit. So 5.2. Let's just keep it rounded up, or rounded out to the nearest. So it goes down to 5.2. Now, here's how we're going to kind of work this. We know we just made our down frame at frame 4 on the first step, right? So while we're working, let's go ahead and let's get the same thing going for our back part of the cycle, the second step. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 frames after the contact, we make our down. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 frames, we make our down. Where do we drop it down to? 5.2. Okay, we know that is now exactly like the other one. And we can see our loop. It's fine, all right? So here's our down frame. We know our passing frame is going to need some adjustment. How much up is really determined upon the next key, which is the up. So instead of putting in my passing now, I'm going to actually, let's go to frame 11. Again, I'm trying to just find even intervals here. I'm going to go to frame 11, and this is going to be our up. So we know that our midpoint here is 5.4. So on frame 11, we know we need to go higher than 5.4. So let's try like 5.6. Okay, so that's not bad. We don't want it to go so high that his legs lock. So 5.6 I think is okay. So again, we have our down, we created our up, so now somewhere in here is going to be the passing, and the great thing about having this one and this one is Maya is tweening it for us, so we kind of get the position of where the passing is going to be for free. But with that said, let's go ahead and get our down, our up pose on the back. So here we are 1, 2, 3, 4 keys in front of the contact. So 1, 2, 3, 4 is going to be this guy. Now where did we move it up to? 5.6. Okay, so our midpoint, 7 or 8 here, is going to be our passing. Now again, we don't really need to, I wouldn't personally adjust it. I think that it's good where it is. So now all we have to do is really just kind of focus on how we want these poses to look. So here at the passing, let's go ahead and move, let's just move this up a little bit. Where did we move it up? 1.49, let's just say 1.5. Okay, so that was frame 7, which is 1, 2, 3 past our down. So 1, 2, 3 past our down. Where do we move it to? 1.3. Right? It is what we did. 1.5. Okay. So selecting on the other one, 1.5. So you see, by doing this, by kind of really mathematically kind of pulling this apart, what you're doing is you're getting those main keys created for you. We have all of our key poses. And as we just kind of work through this, you see that our cycle is just getting more and more refined. So we have our contact, we have our down, we have our passing, we have our up, and our contact. And because of how we're working this, we know that these poses are as perfect of a mirror as we can get. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I can look at my keys and I can see they're not really balanced. If this whole section here, one step, they're not really balanced. So what I want to do is I want to tweak this. So go to my controller, select all the objects. So now I know when I select on this keyframe, I know that it's going to be moving all the keys. So I'm going to use my dope sheet for this. So animation, dope sheet, and zoom my mouse, or we can hit this guy here, frame all keys. So here we are at our first keyframe, okay? Scroll to frame 15. So these keys here are not quite even. If I select these keys up here, you see that basically we've got 2 keys in between this one, 2 keys in between this one, 3 keys in between this one. And then here's our loop. So we've got 3, 3, 2, and 2. I hope that's obvious what we're having here. Now, because of the type of keys that we're picking here, it might not be perfectly clear, but let's try to just balance this out a little bit. Maybe we have 2 and 3, 3 and 2. You see how that is a little bit more balanced. So 2, and I'm using the middle mouse button to move that here. So 2 and 3, 3, and 2 are the keyframe gaps, right? So we have 2 and 3, 3 and 2. So let's move that here. So it looks like we actually have some keys missing, because what we're not seeing, here's our first keys. We actually don't have that frame 0. We only have our frame 1. And that's what's giving us. So let's put this beginning to frame 0. Now we can see there's our frame 0. Now, because I am selected on all of my controller objects, I can just easily pick on this guy, move it to 0, and now I've got my perfect loop here. So we know that this is frame 30. We can see here 30. So let's go 3, 3, 3. Here's 12. Here's 15. So we've got 2 keyframes that are missing here. 2 keyframes before the contact. 2 free, and on this side we've got, there's our other one, right? Here's 2 empties, and then this guy, and then it's 3, 3, and 3 that are in between. So by doing this, we've got our, we can see that we've got our 3 empties, followed by another 3, and 2. Then 3, 3, 3, and 2. So our keys are perfectly uniform, which is what we want. Okay, so nothing's really changed significantly with what we're seeing. There, now I'm seeing all my keys. Cool. All right, so we've got all of our key poses. Again, if we look at the dope sheet, all of our main keys are our contact, our down, our passing, our up, our contact, our down, our passing. They're all evenly distributed throughout the cycle. If there's anything that we wanted to do to them, if we wanted to refine the pose, let me template my bones again so I can select them all like this. We can very easily make those kind of updates. Now you'll see here that there are some things that did not get moved when we did our dope sheet adjustment. You see that there are some keys right here that are not getting visualized. Okay, so what we can do, we can actually move these keys here in our timeline if we wanted to. I think that we're actually probably in a pretty good shape right now. But you can actually make those kind of adjustments here in the timeline. If you hold down the shift button and then drag in the mouse, you see that you actually have a range. And then if you hold control, you see I actually am moving that keyframe around. So let's say I pick my hips, okay, and I want to move this keyframe. So hold shift, I just shift and clicked one time. That selected that keyframe area. Hold control and move it, and now I'm actually moving that key around. So I'm making the adjustments that I was making in the dope sheet right here in the timeline. So just something else to kind of think about. All right, so with that, let's move into, I think that we've got a decent loop happening. So I don't want to get too much more into poses. Again, I'm going to let that be your thing. I just want to cover one more thing real fast, which is graph editor. So when I start this out, I'm going to start with my hips. And let's start with the translate Y, which is our up and down. So when you are working in your graph editor, there's a couple of things to kind of think about. One, what you're looking at obviously is how your movements are being adjusted over time. But there's a couple of very helpful things that you should know about. One, when I'm working on an animation, I like to be able to see both. So if you've got two monitors, just move this over to your other monitor. If you only have one, like I do right now, you can actually just drag this down and dock this within your UI. You see every time it highlights blue, it shows you a place that you can actually dock this. I'm going to actually dock this all the way at the bottom. Actually right here, this is beneath all of the animation timeline. So now I've docked that, so now I can see my graph editor and I can still see what's going on up here as well. And again, I'm focusing on my hips, so pick on my hips, look at my translate Y, and now when I do this, I can see my full graph editor. And over here, you've got pre-infinity cycle and post-infinity cycle. You can also see these by going to view infinity and then turning on your pre-infinity cycle and post-infinity cycle. So now you can see that we can take your keyframes that you've made, and you can see what the wavelength looks like if it just loops on and on and on forever. And one of the things that is very obvious by doing so is right here in the curve, I see there's a weird little hiccup. And that weird hiccup is happening right here where our first keyframe and our last keyframe are coming together. Now, the way that keys are interpolated by default is they are the auto tangent, which means that they start and then they slowly kind of leave that position and then move to the next position, which works for some things like this here. You know, we are moving to the position, we kind of ease into it and we ease out and then we move on. The problem with the loop is that this is not the behavior that you want. It is causing a hiccup in the line. So what we're going to do is we're going to select on, come on, graph editor. All right, we're going to select on that key, and then I'm going to select on the tangent handle. Okay, now if I use my middle mouse button, you see that I can move that tangent handle around. And this is going to greatly affect what the curve does. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down like so. And you can see on this side that because I made this adjustment and because we're cycling it, I can already see what this looks like. So I'm going to do the same thing on this side. And now I just want to match it. I want to match up that curve. And as I'm making the changes on this side, I'm actually looking over here to see, you know, where I need to place it. And what I'm looking for is that nice smooth curve. And if I look at this now, I think that that's a pretty good sine wave. That's very clean. It looks good. Now, you have to ask yourself, do I need these keys? Because they're kind of, you know, they're disrupting the cleanness of the curve a little bit. So like, for example, if I select these guys and delete them, and I look at my sine wave, it's even more clean. It's almost perfect now. And those were remember we had our down, and then we had that keyframe for the passing position, which I said, we really didn't need to mess with it because we're getting it for free because we have our up. And then the next one was the one on 15, which was the other contact pose, right? And we didn't really need to mess with it because we're now, because of it, the way that the algorithm for the auto tangents is handling it, we're getting that position still. And we know, since we're doing our pre and post infinity cycle, we can see what our curve looks like. And now that is just a lot smoother than it was before. And another cool thing about this is, maybe you don't want to have it go down this far. So you can select all of them, use your middle mouse, and you can move them up. If you wanted to, you could offset the keys like so, and you just to a kind of experiment, you can see what that looks like on your character, and do you like the way that looks? What if you make it even more abrupt? What if you offset it this way? And you see how it's changing. It's giving a little bit of character. It's not, ruining the walk. This probably did. But you can actually explore with this because you've got the key elements of what your cycle is doing. You've constructed it well. And now you can really kind of play with it and see what you like, what you don't like. I'm going to leave it like that for now because I think that's fine. Our translate Z, we didn't do anything. We didn't move it forward or backward. And our translate X, we didn't move it side to side at all. But, as you're creating your poses, you're going to hit all of these things. And you really kind of want to approach it the same way I just did that one. Let's take a look at just one more. So here is the translate Y on our lead foot. So we see it slides back and it slowly kind of creeps up. It comes up and then it comes down and then it pops up and quickly pops down. And I think as we look at it, it's okay. I think that this is probably, as far as the back part, when it picks up, that's probably fine. But maybe we don't want it to peak up that high. Again, you can play with it here, but I caution you, just like we took the time to make sure that one side is the same as the other. I would not adjust this one here, honestly. I mean, you could, but you want to make sure that you go and you do the same thing. You give the same attention to the opposite side. So where this guy peaks, wherever you adjusted the other one, make sure you come and do the same thing here. So again, I think that this is probably okay. I can see that if this is the contact pose, when we hit the ground here, it actually drops lower, right? It's lower than where we're saying the contact pose is. So, we could play with that. We could adjust that. Those are, some things that you could spend some time on. So here's the translate Z. This is the forward and backward. So it starts back and it begins moving forward until it gets all the way forward, and then it starts slowing down, or it starts to return. And again, if we look at our cycles, it's okay. I think that we probably could honestly get rid of these middle keys and just let whatever the math is gonna give us be enough. And you can see we've got a nice, beautiful sine wave. There's really nothing we had to do to it. I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing for the other one, just so we can see it pretty quickly. Just delete those keys. And so now we know we've got very smooth motion of our feet coming back, sliding, or moving forward and sliding back. It's very clean. There's really nothing I would do to change this at all. I think that's pretty beautiful. Again, you could tweak this if you wanted. We haven't done anything on the X, so I wouldn't worry with that. But I think that that's really kind of a lot of what I wanted to cover. Just some things that I like to do and how I like to approach. When you're done with the graph editor, if you want to get back to normal, you just grab the tab and you can see that it undocks it and you can close it. And now you're back to whatever you're doing. So again, there's a lot of things we didn't do, but it's not a perfect walk cycle by any means. But I haven't taken it anywhere. But I think that this is a good place to stop. If you have any questions or if this was helpful, let me know. Either way, hope you guys have a good night and have fun animating. And as always, just hit me up. Email is the best way if you have any questions. All right, everybody have a good night.